Good Thursday afternoon. Thanks for joining us on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Chris Harapsky. Our top story this afternoon, federal officials announcing several indictments connected to fraud in Minnesota. The DOJ says it has charged 15 people for fraudulent schemes in Minnesota that officials say targeted more than $90 million in taxpayer money.
Fraud here in Minnesota is shocking. Our cases today involve 7 different state-managed Medicaid programs that have been systematically pilfered by fraudsters who treated Minnesota-run programs as their personal piggy bank. Today's charges are unprecedented. They include the highest loss amount ever charged in a Medicaid case in Minnesota and the largest autism fraud scheme ever charged by the Department of Justice.
Dr. Mehmet Oz, who runs the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, said that concerns about, quote, suspicious billing were raised to them last year, but he said Minnesota's Department of Health assured them that they had it handled.
We didn't hear back from them until the last week of August at a conference, at an event around that conference. There was a comment made by someone who worked in that organization here in Minnesota that they actually didn't have it handled. And there were significant problems that had gotten so out of hand that panic was setting in. And it was at that point that we re-engaged the process and realized that there were programs that had been created here with massive spending that had increased so rapidly that no way to save the program.
We have a team of reporters covering this story today, including our investigative team, which has been covering this fraud in Minnesota for years. You can see all that coverage at kare11.com/fraud. Just in, the mastermind behind the Feeding Our Future scheme, Amy Bach, sentenced to more than 40 years in prison. While prosecutors sought a 50-year sentence, they say that the judge got it right. Bach's defense had asked for no more than 3 years.
This was an unprecedented crime in Minnesota and in our country's history, so it only makes sense that we have an unprecedented sentence, which is what the judge did here. This is what accountability looks like.
Long sentence, and Amy Bach did everything she could to earn it. The judge found what we all knew, which was that Feeding Our Future was entirely fraudulent. All the sites under its sponsorship were fraudulent, and she carried out the scheme every step of the way.
Bach was found guilty last year of coming up with the plan that resulted in fraudsters stealing $250 million meant to feed kids during the pandemic. During that trial, prosecutors showed a picture of a dilapidated building that claimed to serve thousands of meals to kids every day. Jurors also saw Bach's signature on checks paying millions of dollars to other fraudsters, and texts where Bach threatened to sue anyone trying to stop her. This all comes a day after a woman already arrested in the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme was the first to be charged in a sweeping child care fraud investigation. Fahimi Muhammad is accused of falsely certifying information on reimbursement claims in order to receive $4.6 million from the Child Care Assistance Program. Joe McCoy has details from the newly unsealed charges.
Federal prosecutors have now filed the first charges connected to alleged Minnesota daycare fraud since their renewed focus on the topic began in December. Fahima Mahamood was the owner of Future Leaders Early Learning Center and is now charged with fraudulently receiving $4.6 million in Child Care Assistance Program, or CCAP money, from October 2022 to December 2025. Under CCAP rules, child care providers are required to collect co-payments from families and certify they've done so when submitting reimbursement claims. Court documents say Mahamood submitted thousands of reimbursement claims and falsely certified that those payments had been collected. Mahamood was already charged in February for allegedly stealing $854,000 in the Feeding Our Future meal fraud case. The U.S. Attorney's Office also brought charges Wednesday against daycare owner Jelaine Mertens. According to court documents, Mertens defrauded Minnesota's Great Start Compensation Support Payment Program by inflating the number of hours her staff worked and submitting applications for funds for staff that did not work for her at all. Prosecutors say from November 2024 to May 2025, Mertens received $425,000 in funds she was not entitled to across her 3 child care centers. Those are Creative Stars Academy in Rochester and Casson and Tree of Life Academy in Ramsey. Online court records show Mertens is expected to enter a plea agreement during her first court appearance on June 4th.
Developing right now, the Minneapolis City Council passed a 6-month moratorium on data centers over 350,000 square feet in Minneapolis with some exemptions. This amendment is now going to the Minneapolis Zoning Committee for more discussion. There will be a public hearing on the data centers in the city on June 16th, with a final vote happening on June 25th. Group homes are supposed to be places of care and protection for Minnesotans with disabilities. But a new investigation from our partners at NPR News finds a surprising number of people have been dying in those group homes with very little accountability for the companies running them. Here's NPR News reporter Ellie Roth.
And this is one of my favorite ones. This is our wedding photo.
The way Julie Riggs sees it, the state of Minnesota decided her husband's life was only worth $1,000.
That was a good day.
Julie and Ryan Riggs were both volunteer firefighters. They got married in 2021.
Glad you're all here to celebrate with me.
And 3 years later, Ryan got in a motorcycle accident and suffered a traumatic brain injury. When he woke up, Julie said he didn't know who she was.
He didn't know what he was doing. It was just weird. It wasn't Ryan.
Julie couldn't take care of Ryan on her own, so the staff at the hospital in St. Cloud recommended he stay at a group home called Fortunate Homes while he healed. That way, he'd be supervised around the clock. Ryan spent about 6 months at Fortunate Homes. Then, last September, staff there reported him missing. They figured out where he was, but it wasn't until 29 hours later.
Officer Wagner, record statement. How come the police are here today?
We called the police because we found one of our clients, Ryan, back in behind the garage, unconscious.
Ryan had been in the backyard nearly the entire time, and now he was dead. The medical examiner determined he likely died of a fentanyl overdose, but a state investigation said it couldn't rule out hypothermia. The temperature had dropped 45 degrees that night. Julie was stunned. She'd never known him to use opioids.
It's the worst feeling knowing that. I agreed to put him there because I was told that was the best place for him.
Deaths like Ryan's happen way more often than you'd think. State records show at least 50 Minnesota group home residents have died in the past 3.5 years. And in 19 of those 50 cases, including Ryan's, the state investigation found the group home or its staff neglected the resident. When that happens, the state can fine the group home, but those fines are often capped at $5,000 per violation. And in Ryan's case, the initial fine was even smaller, just $1,000.
That's the worst thing yet. That's the worst thing I've ever heard. How can somebody be worth only $1,000?
The state of Minnesota paid Fortunate Homes more than $20,000 a month to care for Ryan, or $764 a day. The fine amounted to less than 2 days' worth of those payments. Fortunate Homes is appealing the maltreatment finding. Its lawyer declined to comment. We asked the Minnesota Department of Health for an interview, and they sent us this statement. It said state law caps the amount it can fine facilities for maltreatment. And after we emailed them about Ryan's case and why the fine was only $1,000, sent a letter to Fortunate Homes. The Department of Health said the original fine was an error, and they issued a new fine for $5,000, which is the most the law allows. For Julie, that's still not enough.
There was a short-lived effort at the Minnesota Capitol this year to give the health department the power to impose larger fines for what they call egregious incidents in which residents of group homes and other assisted living facilities die or are seriously injured as a result of neglect. But lawmakers behind it didn't get enough buy-in to get it passed. U.S. authorities now directing all commercial airlines arriving in the United States from Ebola-affected regions to land in Dulles International Airport in Virginia. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says it will screen passengers arriving from Uganda, Congo, and South Sudan. This as the World Health Organization has declared the outbreak a public health emergency with nearly 600 suspected Ebola cases and 150 deaths. Health officials in Congo now appealing for international help, saying the country is in dire need of more supplies and aid. And authorities say a vaccine is still months away. Meanwhile, the CDC says the outbreak is of low risk to the general public here in the U.S. This afternoon, the largest wildfire burning in northern Minnesota is now fully contained. Crews have been battling the Flanders fire in the Brainerd Lakes area since the weekend. It's burned more than 1,700 acres, about 3 square miles. The DNR is still investigating how it started, but they've identified people of interest. Memorial Day marks the beginning of the 100 deadliest days on the road. That's why Minnesota law enforcement agencies are kicking off a statewide summer enforcement campaign today. Now through Labor Day, they're focusing on the big 4 behaviors that contribute to the most crashes. Those are distracted driving, no seatbelts, speeding, and driving while impaired. Stick with us. We got more news and weather coming up after the break.